Dr. Joe Tlolwe will chair the inquiry relating to editorial interference, while Barbara Watson will chair the sexual harassment inquiry. And I'm joined in studio by both of them and SABC's acting CEO, Nomsa Philiso. Thanks very much for joining me. Let me start with you, Nomsa. Why has the SABC decided to institute these inquiries?
Thank you, Nompumelelo, for having us. It was quite important for us to actually rebase and reposition ourselves, and also to listen to what the complaints have been. So if you recall that from the ad hoc committee days, there was an instruction that we should actually close the loop and go deeper into the allegations that were made. And whilst we were still pondering that, there were a lot of issues that were raised privately and in other forums about sex for jobs in the SABC, and we felt that as a way of repositioning ourselves, let's just do the cleanup. And so we instituted both, and they will run in parallel but separate.
Understood.
And we're just very happy to have the two panelists, the chairpersons here, because they come with a lot of credibility.
Indeed. So now, Barbara, let me start with you ladies first. What will the terms of reference for the sexual harassment inquiry be? And can you also just give us a sense of who can make submissions? Is it just people within the SABC or people who worked here previously? You know, what are the terms?
Thank you so much. The terms of reference are very uncomplicated in that it is a voluntary process. Anybody who is a member of the organization at head office and within the regions who has something to say about sexual harassment can come and see us. Before the job started, staff had been informed about the process, and some submitted a lot of their views, those who feel they want to do it through emails. So there's a lot of documentation that one has to go through. And out of the documentation, of course, would be the face-to-face encounter with the different people, both at head office and in the regions.
And what about people who have perhaps worked here previously but have since left? Will they also be able to submit if they need to?
Yes. We haven't discussed that, but I would imagine in the context of the recent ruling around limitation, you know that not so long ago this matter was brought in front of the courts, whether in fact can you put a limit on how old a case should be on sexual harassment, sexual abuse and all of that. I would imagine SABC would like to align itself with that thinking, that if there is an employee that has been here before and feels very strongly about the matter, they would be encouraged and allowed to come and see us.
And that case that you're referring to obviously decided that there is no time limit.
Precisely.
Even if you feel you were harassed
That's
10
right.
years ago, then
Precisely.
you can bring that.
It is in that context,
That's
yes.
correct. So, Dr. Joe, obviously you're going to be looking at the editorial political interference that came up in the recent past. Just tell us what you're aiming to do there, what the process will be there, and who can file in a submission to you.
In fact, we'll be looking at political interference or possible political interference since 2012 up to now. That's the time limit we are looking at. If there is anybody who believes or has evidence that there was political interference in the editorial department of the SABC, then they are welcome to send in their submissions.
Okay.
We already have a few, scores of submissions from political parties, from staff members, senior staff members, junior staff members. So it's going to be a particularly interesting investigation.
It does seem a bit of a silly question, but how do people communicate with you, both of you?
There's a website where they are encouraged to write and they write to that website, and that stuff filters on through to us.
Yes, I think the same applies to me, that internally staff have been informed on how to make their submissions.
All right, okay. And I suppose external people can just obviously get in touch with the SABC and find out what they need to do.
Yes.
So just in terms of once the process is done, what's going to happen? Are you going to make recommendations? And if you do make those recommendations, what will their status be in law?
I think what's important to remember is that SABC has got a sexual harassment policy, and it is within the parameters of that policy that you should also locate the Commission, that the Commission is not intended to substitute the functioning of the institutional arrangements through the policy, but rather to strengthen it, to provide almost like casting the net very wide. And our recommendations would obviously then say, within the policy of SABC, you can have a formal or an informal way of dealing with sexual harassment. The informal way would be where there is mediation and reconciliation internally, and the formal one would be more like the disciplinary process. So our recommendations will then feed into that process. I think it's actually a very noble way of doing it after the institution has been fraught with a lot of problems, because sexual harassment is a power relation matter, and there's been a lot of power issues within the institutions that have seemed problematic even to me as an outsider looking in. And because sexual harassment falls within that ambit of power relations, it's important to then have this open way of saying, we care about you, the employees. We're giving you an additional facility to talk about your pain. And if you didn't know, or you were fearful of taking the matter forward, through this process, we hope it will be cathartic and heal and lead to an informal process. It will be empowering for those who want to move forward and follow the formal way. So either way, then the policy of the institution gets implemented.
Nomsa, what would you then say to people who are watching who may say, how is the SABC going to avoid a witch hunt?
Okay, and the reason why we have independent chairpersons to actually oversee this process is exactly to avoid that. Because what we didn't add is that in addition to them being the chairpersons, they're going to be also being assisted by a legal firm. So we're going to make sure that as far as possible we do not find things that we can't unsubstantiate, particularly because we have a lot of freelancers, we have a lot of suppliers that come to us who have also complained about these things. So we're also going to be opening that up to them. But the importance of the independence is exactly that, so that there's no bias. So in the panel itself, there is no SABC person at all. So when the submissions are made, they will use their expertise to test the veracity thereof, and then they will make recommendations. But I really do want to reassure the people that there will be absolute confidentiality, and that's why we are sort of out of it. Absolute confidentiality, and we do want to see these to its logical conclusion. Okay. And we've extended until this Friday, because we had the initial close off as last week Friday, but then we had requests, and we've extended until this Friday. So we're still receiving submissions, and whoever still feels strongly must come through and submit to the email addresses that are available. Okay.
And Ndate, lastly with you, since the investigations are running parallel, how long will the process be? When are you going to come back with the findings and recommendations?
The initial agreement is that we will try and have it done by the end of August. But we are not sure, depending on the number of submissions we get and how long it's going to take to test those submissions.
All right. Thank you very much, all three of you, for your time and giving us some insight on this issue. That was Dr. Joe Hlole and Barbara Watson, and of course our SABC Acting GCEO, Nomsa Piliso. Your market news coming up after a short